Namaste. In a stunning victory and an important verdict for government and bank retirees, the Punjab and Haryana High Court ruled in favor of Sajjan Kumar Goyal, a retired officer of Kaithal Municipal Corporation. The Chandigarh bench ordered the Reserve Bank of India to direct all agency banks that no recovery of excess pension may be taken from a retiree's bank account without the pensioner's knowledge, consent, or prior notice, and that any such recovery must adhere in the strictest sense possible to the governing service rules. I am Priyanka Chakraborty and my co-host is Ani Agrawal.
Yes, the ruling by the Punjab and Haryana High Court in Civil Writ Petition 32661-2024 was handed down in November 2025, further boosting the previous precedents by several courts across India, including the Supreme Court, that dignity in retirement for pensioners is a right and not a discretionary favor at the whim of employers and the Union of India.
Exactly. We are talking about Rs 663 lakh, a substantial sum unilaterally deducted overnight from the retiree's PNB account without notice to the retiree, nor any concern or consideration for his needs to meet medical costs, food, or his right to life and dignity in retirement.
And this appalling situation, the abrupt disappearance of a life-saving amount of money from the retiree's bank account, was the starting point for what might be one of the most important judicial rulings for pensioners in India in recent memory.
Right. So today, we are taking a deep dive into this landmark judgment from the Punjab and Haryana High Court. It was delivered by the highly influential and arguably progressive judge, Justice Harpreet Singh Brar, on November 4th, 2025.
And our mission here is to really get into the nuts and bolts of this order, because it does more than just fix a problem for one person. It sets a huge national precedent that, frankly, curtails the power of banks to just claw back money whenever they think they've made a mistake.
Okay, so who are the players here?
The petitioner is a man named Sajjan Kumar Goyal. He's a former executive officer from the municipal corporation in Kaithal. And the bank at the center of all this is Punjab National Bank, or PNB.
And what really makes this case so critical and what we really need to focus on is that the court didn't just stop with Mr. Goyal.
No, not at all. It went bigger, fundamentally changed the system by getting the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, directly involved. It mandated them to enforce new protective rules for everyone, nationwide.
Okay, let's unpack the timeline of this so-called error, because understanding the chronology is, I think, key to understanding why the court was so outraged.
Absolutely. So Mr. Goyal Sandanesi Ditsan Goyal retired back in February of 2016.
Okay?
Standard procedure. His pension payment order, the PPO, that was issued in August 2016. Everything's normal.
For a few years at least?
For a couple years, yes. Then in 2019, the government brought in some revised pension rules. This meant an adjustment in Mr. Goyal's monthly payments, and this right here is where the clerical error began.
And it went completely unnoticed.
For almost 2 years, nobody saw it.
Until March 31st, 2021, that's the day PNB just took action. They debited that huge sum, the Rs 6.6 lakh, from his bank account.
With no warning.
Yeah, no consultation.
Not a word. Nothing.
And their explanation?
Well, when they finally gave one, it was a classic case of institutional accounting failure. They just said clerical error. They claimed it had caused Mr. Goyal to get his Dearness Allowance, or DA, paid out twice.
Okay, let's pause on that DA explanation for a moment. For listeners who aren't steeped in Indian government payroll, what exactly is a Dearness Allowance? And how on earth did they manage to pay it twice?
Right. So the Dearness Allowance is essentially a cost of living adjustment. It's meant to offset inflation. It's a percentage of the basic pension, and it gets revised from time to time.
So when the pension was revised in 2019...
Exactly. When the pension was revised, the bank was supposed to calculate the new DA based only on that new revised pension amount, but they didn't.
They messed up.
They messed up big time. The error meant they kept paying the DA on the old unrevised pension. and they started paying it on the new revised pension at the same time.
So he was getting 2 DAs every single month.
For 23 months from April 2019 all the way to February 2021. It was just an incredibly messy, compounded failure.
And what's astonishing to me is not just the failure itself, but what they did after. They let this mistake build up for almost 2 full years, and then, without any warning, no show cause notice, nothing. They just grabbed the money back from his PNB account.
It really speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the level of institutional privilege they thought they had. They just steamrolled right over every rule of due process. And some of these payments were for periods more than 5 years before the recovery order.
Wow.
The bank just unilaterally corrected ancient history.
And that lack of due process which blindsided my Goyal is really where the court brought the hammer down.
It is. Justice Brar was crystal clear, debiting the account without giving any notice or a chance for a hearing. That violated the fundamental principles of natural justice. Full stop.
That concept, natural justice, it's so foundational. Can you break that down a bit? What does the court actually mean when it says those principles were violated?
It's all about procedural fairness. At its core, natural justice boils down to two things. First, you have to hear both sides of the story, audi alteram partem. And second, you can't be a judge, jury, and the executioner in your own case.
Right.
So when the bank decided an error happened, calculated the amount, and then took the money, they acted as the accuser, the judge, and the executor. Mr. Goyal had no chance to even see the calculation, let alone dispute it.
So the bank broke these huge foundational legal principles. But the court's reasoning went even deeper, didn't it? It pointed to specific employment rules.
It did. And this is so important. The court found that the bank had violated the specific rules in place for state employees. It pointed out that both the Haryana Civil Services Pension and Punjab Civil Services rules strictly forbid any recovery from a pension without the pensioner's explicit written consent.
If you find this podcast interesting, please comment, like, and share with families and friends.
And don't forget to subscribe. It costs nothing to do so.
That's the key detail, isn't it? The rules themselves say you can only do this if the employee signs an undertaking in writing when they retire.
Exactly. An undertaking that says they agree to refund any future excess payments. But no such document was ever signed by Sajjan Kumar Goyal. So the bank's action was illegal on 3 different fronts: natural justice, the state service rules, and the lack of a required contract.
This sounds like a huge move from the High Court, but were they breaking new ground here or just enforcing existing law that banks have been ignoring?
They were firmly enforcing established precedent, which gives the ruling so much more weight. They specifically cited the landmark Supreme Court judgment in Civil Appeal 115-27 2014, State of Punjab versus Rafiq Masih.
The Rafiq Masih case. That one is critical for retirees.
It is. The core principle from Rafiq Masih is that recovery from retired employees is, generally speaking, not allowed in law, especially when the overpayment wasn't the employee's fault. No fraud, no misrepresentation, but just an institutional mistake.
Because ultimately, retirees are vulnerable with limited resources and are at a power disadvantage relative to institutions like PNB.
Precisely. The Supreme Court recognized that pensioners aren't earning a salary. They depend completely on that fixed monthly income. Taking a huge lump sum back, even if it's technically because of a bank's error, causes such disproportionate hardship that it's considered fundamentally unjust.
And it seems like Justice Brar really leaned into that human element beyond just the legal points. He talked about the very purpose of a pension.
He did, yeah. The judgment specifically says that pensioners depend on this money for immediate household needs and, crucially, for their medical expenses. The court acknowledged that just yanking that money back causes severe hardship, and it completely undermines the whole point of a pension, which is to provide security.
He also connected it to the idea of a welfare state, right?
Yes. The judge used some strong language. He said, "These kinds of arbitrary, uncommunicated recoveries go against the spirit of a welfare administration and demonstrate a shocking lack of humane consideration.
That is strong language for a court order.
It is. The court basically said, look, when you do this, you erode public trust. You damage confidence in the fairness of the whole system. The error wasn't just a number on a ledger. It was a failure of the state to protect one of its most vulnerable citizens.
So let's shift from the legal reasoning to the practical fix. What did the court actually mandate for Sarjan Kumar Goyal?
The immediate remedy was, very robust. The court set aside the recovery order completely. It told the authorities to refund the entire amount, all Rs 63,688, plus 6% annual interest.
And the interest starts from when?
From the date Mr. Goyal filed his petition until the day he actually gets the money back in his account. And they gave them a deadline.
Which was?
3 months.
Okay, so justice was served for the individual. But the real impact, the reason we're doing this deep dive, is the systemic change the court demanded. This is where the RBI comes in.
This is the landmark moment. The Punjab and Haryana High Court went so far beyond just this one case. It recognized that these clerical errors could be happening everywhere, across the whole country. So it directed the Reserve Bank of India to issue formal instructions to all agency banks.
When the court says agency banks, what are we talking about exactly?
Agency banks are basically the commercial banks that the government authorizes to do its business, and that includes disbursing pensions.
So pretty much all the major banks.
Exactly. So by ordering the RBI to instruct all of them, the court made sure this ruling wasn't just limited to Punjab or PNB. It created a single uniform national standard to protect all pensioners.
And that really is the key takeaway here. So what is this new national standard? What does the RBI now have to tell these banks to do?
The court laid out 2 non-negotiable requirements. First, no recovery of any excess pension can be made without the pensioner's prior knowledge, their explicit consent, or at the very least, a formal notice that details the supposed excess payment and the exact amount.
So, no more surprise debits.
No more surprise debits. And the second requirement is that any recovery has to strictly follow the governing service rules for that specific pensioner.
Meaning the banks can't just make up their own rules anymore?
Precisely. If the civil service rules for that employee, you need a written undertaking to make a recovery, then the bank has to follow that rule. Period.
So, procedural fairness now legally trumps institutional convenience and privilege. The institution that made the mistake has to go through due process. They can't just fix their books at the pensioner's expense.
That's it exactly. This ruling guarantees that the vulnerable party, the retiree, gets a voice. It ensures they get notice before their main source of income is arbitrarily slashed. The court recognized that, yes, accounting errors need to be fixed, but not at the cost of a person's economic stability and basic dignity.
It's a powerful narrative arc, isn't it? One person fighting a huge bank over an accounting error, and it leads to a judicial ruling that forces the national regulator to reform practices for every single bank in the country. So this deep dive really gives you, the listener, the full context of this huge judicial shift.
The core principle is now crystal clear. When it comes to these alleged administrative errors, procedural fairness, that means notice, consent, and following the rules has to come before any attempt by an institution to just take the money back.
Right, and this brings up a really challenging final thought for all of us to reflect on. Over to you, Anil. You have the con.
Thanks, Priya. So, if we accept that these kinds of clerical errors involving huge sums of money can happen at the institutional level and go completely unnoticed for years, well, how should our banking systems balance the need to correct those errors and maintain financial integrity with the fundamental human right of a pensioner to economic stability and due process?
That's a big question.
It is, isn't it? Should the burden of an institution's long-term mistake always fall solely on the most vulnerable person in the equation? Or should the institution that was negligent have to absorb some of the financial consequences of its own systemic failures?
A question that the RBI is now legally on the hook to address. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We would like to finish today's podcast by paraphrasing the late Senator Edward Kennedy of America. To all the elders of India's banking whose fight for pension justice keeps the hopes of thousands of pensioners alive. The updation fight goes on, the cause endures, and the fight for justice goes on, for as long as the sun remains in the sky.